I froze in the hallway, clutching Sophie to my chest as if I could shield her from the entire world. Her little arms wrapped around my neck, warm and trembling, and for one terrifying second I thought she might cry. My heart hammered, so hard I was afraid Brandon could hear it through the bedroom door. "Mommy, where are we going?" Sophie whispered, her big brown eyes glistening with the kind of innocence that shatters your soul. I pressed my lips to her hair. Just hold on to me, sweetheart. I'll tell you later." Behind me, Ethan stood like a soldier, his 13-year-old hands gripping the duffel bag that held the only pieces of our life I dared to take. Clothes, birth certificates, and the small envelope of cash I had hidden for weeks. His face was pale but determined. He had learned too early how to read the danger in this house, how to step silently when Brandon was home. We moved down the hallway slowly, every step deliberate, like thieves in our own lives. From behind the bedroom door came the deep, uneven sound of Brandon snoring. He had been celebrating a promotion that night, though celebrating, in his language, meant drinking until the world blurred and then picking a fight with me because his shirt wasn't pressed right or because dinner wasn't warm enough. I paused at the front door, holding Sophie tight as I glanced back. Ethan nodded. No words, we couldn't risk them. I reached for the doorknob, my fingers trembling. For one horrifying second, it squeaked. My breath hitched, but the snoring continued slower, heavier. Thank God. I pulled the door open and slipped out into the cool night. The air hit my face like freedom and fear mixed into one. I strapped Sophie into her car seat while Ethan climbed into the back beside her, keeping one protective arm across her lap like he had practiced this moment in his head. "You okay?" I whispered. He gave a tight nod. When I slid into the driver's seat, I realized my hands were shaking so badly I could barely fit the key into the ignition. My life with Brandon flashed in that small, trembling motion. Our first date, when he listened to me talk about teaching music as if I were the most interesting person on earth. The first bouquet of flowers he ever gave me, a promise of forever. Then the first time his fist connected with my cheek because he saw a text from an old college friend. I had told myself it was stress. I had told myself it would get better, but it never did. It only got worse. Brandon was a former police officer. Even after he was suspended for unnecessary force, he carried himself like the law belonged to him alone. Once, when I threatened to leave, he leaned in close and whispered, "If you call the cops, your boy won't live to see the morning." I believed him. But tonight, I had something I hadn't had before. Hope. A month of secret planning, of hiding money from grocery cashbacks, of selling my beloved piano, my last link to the woman I used to be. Tonight, I finally took the children and left. As I drove away, Sophie snuggled into her blanket and whispered, "Mommy, it's dark." "It's okay, baby. It's just nighttime. You can sleep." Ethan leaned forward from the back seat. "Mom, is he going to come after us?" I glanced at his reflection in the mirror, seeing too much of Brandon in his eyes, but also something Brandon never had: compassion. "No, honey, not tonight. We're going somewhere he can't find us." And I prayed I was telling the truth. The highway opened ahead of us, and with each passing mile, the weight on my chest eased just enough for me to breathe again. Behind me, my children slept. Ahead, the unknown waited, and maybe, just maybe, a second chance at life. I used to believe Brandon was my safe place. That thought feels laughable now, but back then, I thought I had found my forever. We met on a dating site when I was 26, a music teacher still carrying student loans and a heart too eager to trust. His profile showed a confident man with kind eyes and a grin that promised security. He loved classical music, fine wine, photography, things that made him seem cultured and steady. He wrote, "I'm looking for a woman who values family, loyalty, and honesty." I should have read that last word twice. Our first date was in a quiet coffee shop downtown. Brandon listened with this laser focus as I rambled about teaching piano to kids who couldn't sit still, about my dream to open a music studio one day. He held my hand by the second date and kissed me under soft city lights after the third. I thought I'd hit the jackpot. We married less than a year later. I told myself that when you know, but what I didn't know was how quickly love can turn into ownership. It started small. A casual, "I don't like when you talk to male coworkers." Then it was, "Why are you still texting old friends? Don't you know how that looks?" I stopped seeing my friends as often, stopped answering texts unless he approved. He said he just wanted to protect me, to keep me safe. I believed him until the night I texted an old college friend a simple happy birthday. Brandon saw it and lost control. I can still hear his voice, low and dangerous. "You think I'm a fool? You think I don't know what you're doing?" His hand struck my face so fast I didn't even process it until I tasted blood. I convinced myself it was stress from his job as a police officer. He protects people all day. Of course he's on edge, I thought. I even apologized for making him mad. But apologies didn't stop him. Over time, his anger became routine. Dinner slightly cold, a shove into the counter, his shirt not ironed perfectly, my arm twisted behind my back. Once, when Sophie was still an infant, I set a glass of water on the table, and he screamed it was too warm, then threw it at the wall an inch from my head. The worst part wasn't the pain. It was the way he could switch instantly from rage to calm, and then act as if nothing had happened. And he had power. Brandon might have been suspended from the force for excessive force, but he still had connections. He knew how to intimidate people, how to make things disappear. The night I whispered, "Maybe I should call the police," he leaned down so close I could smell the alcohol on his breath and said, "If you ever call them, your boy won't live to see morning." I froze. Ethan was only 10 then, sitting in his room, wearing headphones and playing games, unaware his father had just weaponized his life. From that night on, I stopped thinking about escape until Sophie came along. She was just a baby, sweet and fragile. Something about holding her in the crook of my arm and seeing Ethan's protective hand resting on her tiny foot cracked something inside me. I couldn't imagine them growing up thinking abuse was normal. Still, leaving Brandon seemed impossible. He controlled our bank accounts, knew everyone in our neighborhood, even had neighbors who admired him. They didn't see the man who slammed my head against the fridge for buying the wrong cereal. They saw Officer Brandon Spencer, community hero. But little by little, the idea took root. When he called me worthless for the 100th time, when Ethan stood in a doorway watching with a clenched jaw, when Sophie cried at sudden loud noises, I began to see it clearly. Staying would destroy us all. That was when I started to plan in secret, in silence, with shaking hands and a heart that finally whispered, "Enough!" The decision to leave was not a single moment of bravery, but 100 small steps, each one more terrifying than the last. I started with cash. Grocery store trips became my secret lifeline. Every time Brandon sent me for food, I added a 20 to the withdrawal and hid it in an old music book. He never checked those. Music was my world, not his. In a month, I scraped together a few $100s. Not much, but enough to start. Next came my job. I loved teaching at the community music school, but Brandon hated it. He said it kept me distracted, as if nurturing young musicians was an insult to him. I told the director I was exhausted, needed a break to focus on family. She gave me a sad smile like she knew more than she let on. Leaving that job hurt, but it gave me an excuse to stay home. Less risk of Brandon tracking my movements. I transferred Ethan to online schooling. The excuse? He had health concerns. The truth? I couldn't risk him talking about our plans to anyone. Sophie was too young to understand, but Ethan looked at me with those big gray eyes, so much like Aaron's, and simply said, "Okay, Mom, whatever we need to do." Aaron. Just thinking his name brought a pinch of pain and a flicker of warmth. He was my first real love, a cellist whose music could silence a room. We were barely more than kids when we fell into something reckless and beautiful. And then I let him go. No, I pushed him away because he deserved a life free from my chaos, free from being tied down. I never told him I was pregnant. When Ethan was born, I stared at his eyes and saw Aaron in every glance. I told myself it didn't matter, that Brandon would be his father now. But Brandon never loved Ethan the way a father should. There was always an edge, a distance, something cold in the way he said son. So when an envelope arrived one morning, inheritance papers from my late aunt in Willamette Valley, I felt something shift. It was a house, small and old, but ours. Brandon didn't know it existed. He didn't even know Aunt May well enough to care. That house became my lifeline, the one place where his shadow couldn't reach. Planning meant lying, and I hated that. I hated hiding in the library to book train tickets on their computers so Brandon couldn't trace them. I hated selling my piano, my one true friend, just to have enough money for a deposit on utilities and a few groceries when we arrived. But I hated more the thought of Ethan's clenched fists and Sophie's flinches every time Brandon's voice rose. The night before we left, I sat in Sophie's room watching her sleep. She clutched her stuffed rabbit like it could save her from nightmares. Ethan leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "Mom," he whispered, "are we really doing this?" "Yes, sweetheart." I swallowed hard. "We are. Tomorrow we're leaving. Will he find us?" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "Not if I can help it. And even if he tries, we'll be ready." Ethan nodded, his jaw set in a way that broke my heart. 13 years old and already carrying the weight of a man. I barely slept that night. My mind played out every scenario where Brandon woke up too early, where he blocked the door, where he used those cold, calculating eyes to stop me. But morning came and I acted. We took the bags, the kids, and my last shred of courage and stepped out into an unknown future. As the train pulled away from Portland, Sophie pointed at the window and squealed, "Look, Mommy, trees!" "Yes, baby, trees." My voice cracked. Those trees were freedom. And somewhere inside, a whisper rose. "You can do this." The train slowed as it pulled into a quiet station surrounded by rolling green hills and stretches of vineyard. Willamette Valley looked like a postcard, sunlight spilling over rows of grapevines, distant mountains rising like watchful guardians, and an air so crisp it felt new in my lungs. "This is it?" Ethan asked, leaning to see out the window. His voice carried curiosity and caution, the voice of a boy who had grown up too fast. "This is it," I said softly, gripping Sophie's hand as we stepped onto the platform. She clutched her stuffed rabbit and blinked at the endless open space like she'd stepped into another world. The cab ride to Aunt May's house was quiet except for Sophie's small hums and Ethan's questions about everything outside the window. We passed old barns, weathered fences, and roadside fruit stands with chalkboard signs. For a moment, I let myself imagine that we were on vacation, not fugitives from a life of fear. Aunt May's house sat at the edge of a narrow road, half hidden by tall pines and wildflowers. The structure itself was sturdy but old, a 2-story cabin of weathered wood and charm. The windows had lace curtains yellowed with age, and the porch swing creaked in the breeze as though welcoming us home. Unlocking that door was surreal. The key turned stiffly, and when the door opened, a wave of scent rushed out. Dried herbs, old books, and something faintly sweet like honey. It felt untouched, frozen in time since Aunt May's last day there. Ethan dropped his bag and whistled low. "It's like a museum." Sophie, on the other hand, skipped inside without hesitation, touching everything she could reach. "It's our house, Mommy." I crouched down to her level. "Yes, baby, our house." But reality didn't take long to settle in. The fridge was empty, utilities were off, and the place needed a deep cleaning. Worse, I had no job waiting for me. My savings, already thin, would evaporate quickly between groceries, gas, and basic bills. The next day, I walked into the small town's only grocery store. The bell over the door jingled as I stepped inside, immediately feeling eyes on me. In small towns, strangers were novelties, and I was the newest one. A woman behind the counter gave me a polite but curious smile. "You must be May's niece. Word travels fast here. Yes, I'm Natalie, I replied, forcing a smile. Just moved in. Welcome. This place could use a music teacher. Her tone was warm, but I didn't want to explain that I had no position lined up and that I'd left my old life in chaos. So I just thanked her and bought what we could afford: bread, peanut butter, a bag of apples, and pasta for dinner. Back home, Ethan wandered the overgrown backyard while Sophie twirled in circles on the porch. Mom, can we fix this place up? Ethan asked later that evening, his voice full of something I hadn't heard in a long time: hope. Yes, we can, I said, though my chest tightened with doubt. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat on the porch, staring at the stars. The stillness of this place was almost foreign. No shouting, no slammed doors, no footsteps pacing with anger behind me. But freedom came with silence, and silence left room for fear. Would Brandon find us? Would he come pounding on this door one day? My mind spiraled with what-ifs until I forced myself to breathe deeply, to feel the rough wood under my hands, to listen to the crickets. We're safe now, I whispered to myself, though I wasn't entirely sure I believed it. Still, as the night deepened and the breeze wrapped around me like a soft blanket, I made a vow. No matter how hard it would be, this place would become a real home, a place where my kids could laugh without fear. I first saw Kayla Morrison at the elementary school playground, of all places. Sophie had spotted a little girl swinging by herself and immediately ran over. Hi, I'm Sophie, she chirped, all curls and sunshine. The girl smiled shyly. I'm Chloe. Within minutes, they were giggling like old friends, chasing each other around the slides. Then I saw him, Caleb, a tall, broad-shouldered man with hands like they were carved from wood, strong and capable, but with eyes so gentle it startled me. He waved at Chloe before noticing me. You must be Sophie's mom. I'm Caleb Morrison, he said, his voice deep, warm, but a little rough, like gravel under honey. For a heartbeat, I froze. Something about big men with deep voices still made my stomach clench, a reflex I couldn't turn off. My pulse kicked up, and I gripped Sophie's jacket tighter. Natalie Spencer, I managed, hoping he didn't hear the tremor in my tone. He smiled, easy and genuine, and crouched to check Chloe's untied shoelace. Looks like our girls are already friends, he said, glancing back at me. That's a good start. I nodded, still uneasy but grateful. Yeah, it is. Later that week, I found him again, this time in front of our house. I'd been wrestling with the old fence that bordered the yard, a fence so warped it looked like one hard wind could knock it flat. Caleb appeared out of nowhere, wearing work gloves and carrying a toolbox. Mind if I help? He asked. I blinked at him. You don't even know me. He shrugged. I know Chloe likes Sophie. That's enough. Part of me wanted to refuse. I didn't want another man fixing things for me. Didn't want to owe anyone anything. But Sophie came bouncing out, Chloe right behind her, both begging, please let him help Mommy. Please. So I said yes. Caleb worked with a quiet efficiency, measuring boards, cutting new slats from lumber he'd brought in his truck. He talked just enough to fill the silence without crowding it, telling me he owned the local wood shop and vineyard, that he'd grown up in this town and never planned to leave. His wife, he explained softly, had died in a bus accident 3 years earlier, leaving him with Chloe to raise alone. There was a steadiness to him, a sense that he wasn't trying to impress anyone. And yet, that night, I dreamed about him, only it wasn't romantic. It was dark. I dreamed of giant hands grabbing me, of being dragged into a pit, and I woke up shaking, Caleb's face and Brandon's voice tangled in my mind. The next morning, Caleb returned, not with questions, but with something unexpected. A small wooden box, carved beautifully with delicate vines and music notes. Heard you used to teach piano, he said, handing it to me. Figured you might like this. I opened it and gasped. Inside, a tiny dancer spun to the soft, tinkling notes of Beethoven's Für Elise. My fingers trembled as I touched the lid. Did you make this? I asked quietly. He nodded. It's what I do. work with wood, build things people can use or keep. For a moment, I couldn't speak. It had been so long since someone had given me anything just because. You don't have to worry about people here, he said, as if reading my mind. This town protects its own. Later, while buying groceries, the shop owner, Mrs. Lane, leaned over the counter and whispered, "We know who you left, sweetheart. Don't worry. Nobody here will tell him a thing. You're safe here." Safe. It was a word I hadn't trusted in years. But as I walked home with Sophie's small hand in mine and that carved box under my arm, I wanted, desperately, to believe it. Maybe, just maybe, we had found the right place to start over. Even after a month in Willamette Valley, my body still reacted to loud noises like they were threats. A slammed car door? My chest tightened. Heavy footsteps on the porch? My stomach flipped. I'd tell myself, "You're safe now. Brandon isn't here," but my heart never listened. Caleb noticed. One evening, he came by after dropping Chloe at Sophie's playdate. "I fixed the gate hinge," he said, holding up his tools. "Figured it might save you some headaches." I hesitated. "You don't have to keep doing things for us." "I know," he said simply, "but I like to." His honesty was disarming. He wasn't trying to charm me, wasn't pushing for more. He was just there, present, helpful, and yet, some part of me couldn't stop bracing for the moment when kindness turned into control. That night, I dreamed again about hands dragging me into a hole. Only this time Caleb's face melted into Brandon's, and I woke gasping. I hated that my mind did this, that it twisted even good people into threats. The next morning, Sophie tugged my sleeve. "Mommy, why don't you like Mr. Caleb? He's nice." I crouched down, brushing her hair back. "I like him, sweetheart. Mommy's just learning to feel safe again." She frowned, clearly confused, but hugged me tight. That simple hug felt like permission to try harder. A week later, I saw Caleb at the farmer's market. He was buying lumber from another vendor and waved when he spotted me. Something about the normalcy of it, the casual wave, the way he didn't approach unless I waved back, put me at ease. So I waved back. We started talking more, mostly about the kids and small-town things, where the best walking trails were, which grocery store had decent produce, how early the fall festival started. One afternoon, he invited us to see a woodworking project he'd been finishing for the local church. When we walked into his workshop, I expected dust and chaos, but everything was neat, carefully labeled, each tool hanging like it had a purpose. In the center stood a stunning wooden altar rail, carved with delicate vines and tiny birds so lifelike they looked ready to take flight. "You did this?" Ethan asked, eyes wide. "Yeah," Caleb said, smiling. "Want to help sand this piece." Ethan, usually cautious around new adults, grabbed the sandpaper and started working like he'd known Caleb forever. That sight, my son laughing with a man who treated him kindly, without judgment or threats, did something to me. That evening, Caleb dropped off a small bag of groceries. "Extras from the vineyard kitchen," he said. "Thought you could use them." I almost refused, pride flaring up, but he added quietly, "No strings, Natalie. Just food for your family." I took the bag and whispered, "Thank you." Later, after Sophie and Ethan were asleep, I stood on the porch holding that small bag like it weighed 100 pounds. Part of me wanted to cry from gratitude. Part of me wanted to run because kindness felt like a trick. Instead, I sat down and emailed Aaron. I'd been ignoring his last message for days, the one where he said he wanted to catch up. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I typed. "Aaron, there's something I need to tell you about our son." I didn't hit send, but the words were there now, out of my head onto the screen. I was building bonds again, cautiously, painfully, but I was doing it. For the first time in years, I went to bed that night without locking the bedroom door. It happened on a Sunday morning. Warm sunlight streaming through the kitchen window, while Sophie and Chloe colored at the table. Ethan sat by the door lacing his sneakers for a hike with Caleb, who had promised to show him a secret waterfall. The house smelled of cinnamon rolls, and something I hadn't felt in years, peace. Then came the knock. Hard, demanding. I froze. Caleb, standing near the counter, shot me a questioning look. My stomach dropped because I knew that rhythm. 3 quick knocks, 1 pause, 2 more. Brandon, I whispered, take the kids to the back. Caleb nodded without a word, ushering Ethan and the girls toward the back door. The knock came again, louder this time, shaking the thin wooden frame. My hands trembled as I opened it a crack. And there he was. Brandon looked exactly as he had the night we left. Crisp shirt, expensive cologne. That same cold arrogance in his eyes. Well, there you are, sweetheart, he said, smiling like we were still married, like he hadn't broken my cheekbone 2 months ago. Thought you could just run off with my kids? I stepped outside, shutting the door behind me. Leave, Brandon. You don't belong here. His smile twisted into something darker. Don't belong? This is my family. You think I wouldn't find you? You think you can take what's mine? He stepped closer, the heat of his anger rolling off him. I held my ground. I am not yours. Not anymore. His eyes narrowed. You think some small-town hick can protect you? He glanced past me toward the window, where Caleb now stood, silent, watchful, dangerous in his own quiet way. What is this, Natalie? You got yourself a new man already. Get off my property. My voice cracked, but didn't break. Brandon's face hardened. He shoved me. It wasn't hard enough to knock me down, but it was enough to make old reflexes flare. My hands shot up defensively as my breath caught in my chest. The door slammed open behind me. Caleb stepped out, his broad shoulders filling the doorway like a wall. You need to leave, he said calmly, but there was steel in his tone. Brandon laughed, a short, cruel sound. And who the hell are you? Some handyman who thinks he's a hero. Caleb moved forward slowly, like someone used to dealing with wild animals. Doesn't matter who I am. What matters is you're trespassing. Leave now or I call the sheriff. Brandon sneered, stepping toward me again. She's my wife. Ex-wife. I corrected, my voice steady now. And you're not touching me again. That must have hit a nerve because Brandon's face flushed red. He lunged, grabbing my arm hard enough to leave bruises. The pain was sharp and immediate. We're going home, Natalie. Now. Before I could react, Caleb was there, pulling Brandon's hand off me with one swift motion. The sound of knuckles cracking against flesh echoed as Caleb shoved him back against the porch rail. For a second, I saw something raw and dangerous in Caleb's eyes. Something that said he'd bury Brandon in the woods if he had to. Brandon swung at him. But Caleb ducked, caught his arm, and twisted it behind his back, forcing him down. Touch her again, Caleb growled, and I swear you won't walk out of here on your own. Let go of me. I'm law enforcement. Brandon yelled. Former law enforcement, Caleb shot back. You're already under investigation. You think people around here don't talk. The sound of sirens cut through the moment. I hadn't even realized Ethan had slipped away and called 911. 2 sheriff deputies stormed up the driveway seconds later. Brandon stiffened, trying to regain his composure. This is a misunderstanding, he started, but one deputy was already pulling out handcuffs. Brandon Spencer, the officer said, you're under arrest for assault and violation of a restraining order. I didn't. You can explain it downtown. They hauled him away, still yelling, still promising he'd be back. But I didn't hear the words, not really. I was too busy shaking, my back against the porch column, tears spilling freely. Caleb stepped closer, his hand hovering near mine. You okay? I nodded, though I wasn't sure it was true. He's gone, I whispered, more to myself than him. Caleb's eyes softened. He's not coming back. Not with half this county ready to make sure of it. For the first time since leaving Portland, I believed it. For the first time in months, I woke up without dread pressing on my chest. The house was quiet, except for Sophie's soft singing in the next room and the faint sound of Ethan moving about in the kitchen. No heavy boots stomping down the hall. No voice shouting my name like a threat. The sheriff had assured me Brandon wouldn't be out anytime soon. Witness statements, the restraining order, and even testimonies from other women he'd hurt over the years sealed his fate for now. Yet, a part of me still slept with my phone under the pillow, ready for a nightmare call. But slowly life crept back in. Ethan joined a local astronomy club, something he'd always wanted to do, but Brandon mocked as a waste of time. I found part-time work teaching piano at the community center. Sophie flourished at school, coming home with messy art projects and endless stories about Chloe and their adventures. The community wrapped around us like a quilt. Mrs. Lane at the grocery store always slipped an extra loaf of bread into my bag. The librarian remembered my name and saved music theory books for me. Even the mayor stopped by once, saying, "We take care of our own here." And Caleb, he kept showing up, but never in a way that felt intrusive. One evening, he fixed the broken porch swing, saying simply, "Your kids deserve a place to sit and watch the stars." Another time, he left a basket of apples from his orchard on the steps. No note, no expectation. I kept telling myself not to read into it, but my heart had other plans. One crisp evening, after Sophie and Chloe had fallen asleep in a fort of blankets, Caleb and I sat on the porch with mugs of tea. The night smelled of pine and distant wood smoke. "You doing okay?" he asked, breaking the comfortable silence. "Better than I ever thought I'd be," I admitted, "though some days I still jump at shadows." "That's normal," he said. "You've been through hell. Healing isn't linear." I nodded, staring at the stars. "I'm just tired of feeling broken." He leaned back, his voice low. "You're not broken, Natalie. You got out. You protected your kids. That's strength, not brokenness." Something in me cracked then, not in a bad way, but like a door opening. I turned to him, words trembling on my tongue. "I'm scared to let anyone close again." Caleb held my gaze, patient and steady. "I'm not asking you to." He paused. "But I'm here if you want me to be." The simplicity of it undid me. No pressure, no expectation, just an offer of presence. And for the first time in a long while, I reached out and covered his hand with mine. Weeks passed, and small things grew into something deeper. Sunday hikes became a habit. Ethan always excited to talk to Caleb about constellations. Sophie riding on his shoulders when her legs got tired. I caught myself smiling more, laughing at things I'd stopped noticing. One afternoon, I opened the old cedar chest in the attic and found Aunt May's journals. Flipping through them, I found a line written in her elegant cursive. "A home is not a roof and walls. It's a place where your soul can rest." Reading it felt like permission. Permission to finally see this old cabin as something more than an escape plan. It was our home now. That night, I stood on the porch, listening to Ethan explaining the constellations to Sophie in the yard, Caleb laughing softly at their playful argument about whether Orion looked like a hunter or a guy dancing weird. My soul felt like it had exhaled for the first time in years. I whispered into the cool night, "We're safe and we're home." And for the first time, I fully believed it. Winter came early to Willamette Valley, painting the vineyards and hills in shades of silver and frost. The cabin smelled of pine and cinnamon, thanks to Sophie's insistence on decorating a Christmas tree big enough to scrape the ceiling beams. Ethan hung the star on top, while Chloe clapped like it was a Broadway finale. I stood back, my heart swelling at the simple scene. Months ago, I wouldn't have believed this could exist. A life free from constant fear, filled with small moments of joy. That evening, a knock came at the door. Not the pounding dread I used to know, but a light, polite knock. Caleb, sitting on the porch steps, stood and opened it before I could. "Natalie." The voice froze me in place. Aaron. He looked older, a few strands of gray at his temples, But his eyes, those gray eyes I'd see every day in Ethan, were unchanged. He held a cello case in one hand, the other jammed nervously into his coat pocket. "Hi," he said softly. "I hope it's okay that I came. You never answered my last message, but then you sent that one line." I swallowed hard. "Aaron, there's something I need to tell you about our son." Ethan appeared behind me, his face a mirror of shock and confusion. "Mom, who's this?" My chest tightened. "Ethan, this is Aaron, your father." For a long, silent moment, Ethan stared at him, jaw tight, eyes narrowed. "My father," he repeated, voice trembling with a mix of anger and curiosity. Aaron stepped forward slightly, his expression pained but gentle. "I didn't know, son. If I had—" "You didn't know because she didn't tell you," Ethan snapped, glancing at me. "Right, Mom." He wasn't wrong. I'd carried that secret like a stone for 13 years. "I thought I was protecting you both," I whispered. "Aaron had this big future, and I thought I'd only hold him back." Aaron stepped closer, careful, like approaching a frightened animal. "I would have been there. For you, for him. I'm sorry I wasn't." His voice cracked slightly. Ethan looked away, jaw clenched. Then he muttered, "Whatever. I have homework," and disappeared up the stairs, leaving the air heavy. I wanted to chase him, to explain, but Caleb touched my arm. "Give him space," he said quietly. His presence grounded me like it always did. Aaron and I sat at the kitchen table while Caleb made tea, the silence awkward but necessary. "I'm not here to disrupt your life," Aaron said finally. I wanted to see him, to see you." I took a shaky breath. "You deserve that chance, and he deserves to know you when he's ready." Aaron nodded. "You look happy, Natalie. Safer." His eyes flicked toward Caleb, who was quietly rinsing mugs in the sink, pretending not to eavesdrop. "I am," I said simply. And it was true. I had scars, yes, but I wasn't broken anymore. That night, Ethan came down from his room, eyes red but determined. "So, you play cello?" he asked Aaron, voice stiff. Aaron smiled carefully. "Yeah. Want to hear?" Ethan shrugged but didn't leave, and Aaron opened his case, pulling out the cello like it was part of him. When the bow touched strings, the house filled with warm, rich sound. Sophie peeked from her blanket fort, whispering, "It sounds like magic." By the time Aaron finished, Ethan's posture had softened. He didn't say much, but he sat closer, watching his father with the cautious hope of a boy testing trust for the first time. Later, when Aaron left for his hotel, Ethan hugged me tightly. "I'm still mad," he whispered, "but I think I want to know him." "That's okay, honey," I said, kissing his forehead. "You get to choose what that looks like." Weeks passed, and slowly, Aaron became a quiet presence in Ethan's life. Someone to talk about music in college with. Someone to share the weight of old wounds. And Caleb? He stayed steady through it all. He never once acted threatened or jealous. Never asked for anything but honesty. One night on the porch, after watching the kids chase snowflakes, I finally said it out loud. "You're more than safe to me, Caleb. You feel like home." He smiled, that easy, warm smile that had disarmed me from day one. "Then let's keep building it. Together." I thought of Aunt May's journal. A home is not a roof and walls. It's a place where your soul can rest. My soul was finally resting. I had faced fear, rebuilt life from the ashes, and even opened my heart again to family, to love, to a future that was ours by choice, not chance. For the first time in years, I looked at my children, at Caleb, at this old cabin filled with laughter, and whispered the truth. We made it. We're free. And I believed it with every fiber of my being.